Right, do the thing. Let's do it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Person Behind the Pages, the show where we get to know the creators that make the things we love. I'm joined today by the wonderful Gregory. How you doing, Gregory?
Hello, I'm awake. That's the important thing. It is very early for me, and I'm an idiot for doing that. But you know what? We're here, so let's do it. I probably did like a close-up for that. Like I got closer to the camera so you could see how tired my eyes are.
We're all awake together. Wonderful. All right. Hello there, Greg Terrell. Not Gregory, my guest. Hello there, JCM Byrne. Hello there, Bert Struble. Thank you all for joining.
People actually joined. I was thinking it was just gonna be us like chatting and chilling for like an hour. Be like, "What's up, man?"
Every once in a while, people actually watch my stuff. You know, how about that, right?
It was more like I actually fully believe they'll be like, "Oh yeah, Nicholas is on. Let's go tune in." But like people see my face, they're like, "No, it's
wow, not that guy, not that." Yeah.
Oh yeah, did I reach the 30-second mark before I cursed? Did I do it? I don't think I did. I think I.
I think you're okay. I think we're over 30 seconds. We can say all the things we want to say.
For those of you that are here, we had a conversation before this that said, "Hey, wait 30 seconds before you curse," and I totally forgot. So that's.
It's specifically the F-bomb. It turns out YouTube doesn't particularly like if you put the F-bomb within the first 30 seconds. But after that, they give you like an allotment. I think it's like a rated R movie. Like you can work it in now and then. You probably like but you probably don't want to get all George Carlin on it, you know?
It's the best word, man. It's so versatile. It's effective. It's the best emphasis you can give something. Like it's fucking perfect. Like, it's just...
I love the bit in Boondock Saints where Rocco's just saying F-bomb, 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 and then they're like, well, it certainly illustrates the diversity of the word, right? Tell me you've seen. You're giving me the face of you haven't seen.
No, I have seen Boondock Saints. I'm 36 years old. I lived through the 90s as a child. I've seen Boondock Saints. Because when it came out, my friends are like, "Oh, we're gonna pretend we have Irish accents now," and just like go on. Really, the reason I was blank staring is I'm trying to do that thing where I center so your face is closer to my mic, so I don't look like I'm staring down at my keyboard the entire time. So that was that. But right now, like I keep looking up at the little pinpoint hole, and I'm like, I'm staring at a machine, and it just looks friggin' weird. So I'm trying to do that
better. I feel like you probably haven't done too many of these interviews, have you, Gregory?
So it's funny because for my work, I actually have to. I'm on Zoom camera, call? Because I do a lot of stuff all the time. So I'm very accustomed to. Staring at people like in the camera like that, especially my boss for my job, like he needs you to be looking at him in the camera. So he taught me that trick to do it because it drives him crazy if I'm not. But no, I have not done too many of these interviews. I am garbage at marketing and like doing the interview stuff. I'll be like, I can write words, and then you're like, oh, but you have to sell it. And I'm like, fuck.
Well, Gregory, that's what we're here for today. I get to help you sell it. We're going to talk about all the words you've written from your book, which is out and available, to all your different tabletop RPG supplemental stuff, which I am super psyched to kind of talk about. I haven't talked to anyone that's working in that regard, so that's going to be really fun. And then I also want to, just chop it up and get to know you a little bit more. That's what this show is all about, person behind the pages, That
sounds... I'm ready to be chopped. Let's do this.
Chop me up. Let's do it.
Let's get deep. I'm not that deep though. There's nothing really that far down to talk about. So
it's all at the surface. It's all right there. So, Gregory, have you seen the old commercials from Budweiser where they would go, "Real American heroes"?
I haven't. So again, I was a child in the 90s, and all I did was watch Comedy Central and Cartoon Network, and Sci-Fi Channel as well. Let's not forget our favorite B movie sci-fi flicks. But oh yeah, absolutely. And like every night, because you watch the evening stuff. Absolutely, yeah, I've seen all of the old trashy commercials. I have indeed seen that.
I feel like you deserve your own homage. You're like, real nerdy hero, Mr. Tabletop RPG Writer. And we can get into like a nice verse of like how Many people like to play tabletop role-playing games, but not everyone has the patience to dream up every mechanic. roll your boat, because you actually you wrote a bit about how ogres and whatnot should be rowing their boats, right? I love how specific that is, how granular it is. The fact that you had to, you know what I mean? Like somebody had to think about it, and that person is you, and you deserve the real nerdy hero.
The thing about that, though, is that this isn't. It's the kind of stuff that players come up with, right? So when I write a TTRPG supplement, most of the way I approach it is as a player, and then you need to do the game design part. That's kind of important. But like, you kind of look at it from a player perspective also, and like shit like that comes up constantly. Like, well, okay, so I have my boat. I have this giant, like, let's say a carrack, which is an old school naval vessel, and there are people and they're rowing it, but it's a fantasy world, right? So it's not necessarily just going to be humans. You might have tamed an ogre, and you're like, ogres are super strong. They can do the work of multiple humans. So what would it look like if this ogre was rowing the boat? So then it's a question as a DM, a game master or a dungeon master, which sounds way dirtier than it actually is. If you're if you have these questions, then with this stuff, you don't actually have to think about the mechanics yourself. You can go, oh, well, that's how that works. So now you have rules for ogres riding boats. It's important, and you should always pay attention to it.
I am 100% on board. Somebody had to do this heavy lift thinking, and you did it for us, and thank you.
It's good to be recognized for my work.
Right. Now I'm thinking about, I want to see like an ogre like chained to a rowboat, just beat the drum, and the ogre's like, fine, roar. I want that in my next game.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's just tame some ogres. Super easy job. So all you gotta do is you go out, find an ogre. Be like, yo, bro, you want to row my boat? And he's gonna be totally like, nah. And you're gonna have to fight it. And that's TTRPGs in a nutshell.
Yeah. True. So I should say, for anyone that's not quite on our nerd level, TTRPG stands for tabletop role-playing games. So Dungeons and Dragons, that sort of thing. But
what? Not everyone knows every acronym you can possibly come up for in a niche genre. What are you talking about? God.
Can I tell you, so briefly before we got on, we were talking just for a second about how my father worked on. He worked for a contractor for NASA. You want to talk about acronyms? They don't know how to speak regular. They don't know full words. They really don't.
The NCP, the AA5, and the say. Okay, cool, dude. That's fine. Those are words.
The SRB's attack to the ET and all with the orbiter. Yeah. Yep.
It's actually one of my giant pet peeves when you're in a chat and someone, they're like a 5-letter acronym, and you're like, great, that's awesome. I'm so happy for you. What does that mean? Thank you so much.
What does it mean? Yeah.
You should all adopt Chicago style of narrative. Sorry, please continue.
No, you're good. You're good. Chicago style of so talk to me a little bit more about like this day job of writing for tabletop RPGs. Like, what is it like? How what sort of does it look like? What sort of different? Obviously, you are writing. You showed me the rules for rowing a boat by different races, and that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what you're writing every day, right? So what kind of goes into it all? What does it look like?
Most of what I do, so I work for a company called Camp Dragon, which is an online come play Dungeons and Dragons with us. We have DMs that run, but you have to pay. It's paid, so don't get too excited. But we have professional dungeon masters like myself, who you can.
Oh, you do that? Okay.
Yeah, I know. I run games. I run very few games. Most of what I do is writing. I test the modules that I end up writing. So anyways, that's what this company does. You come in, you slot a time, you get with either a bunch of strangers or people that you can bring along with you. You sit down, you play a game. So it's a way to play a reliable game with reliable dungeon masters that doesn't get canceled constantly, unless it does. But that happens.
When you sit down and play a game, while talking, it's all online, or do you guys do in person too?
It's all online. Yeah, because we're an online company. So we use a program called Roll20, which has a digital tabletop, and we have maps and all sorts of cool stuff. So that's the company I work for, Camp Dragon, once again, if you're interested. And I'm the head writer, which isn't a position that exists, but it's basically what I am there. So I created all the lore for the world that we have, because we use a custom world setting. So I manage that. I write modules. So I actually create the quests that you'll play. So you'll start from level 1 all the way up to level 20. And we have multiple writers doing quests, but I have a line that I've written from right now from levels 1 to 10 that you'll play through there. So that is essentially that's a full everything. That's mechanics, that's writing quests, that's creating maps, that's kind of engineering enemies and all this kind of stuff. Essentially, it's writing a book only via a game. So that's kind of what that looks like. It's hard. It's very hard to explain TTRPG module design unless you've done it or read through a module. So if you ever like pick up or purchase a module for D&D, for instance, because that's the big popular one. No matter how many people hate Wizards of the Coast, oh boy. Anyway, that's a whole thing. But yeah, if you've ever picked up or read a module, it's this big thick book, and it's probably 100 to 200 pages, and it's just loaded with like monsters and mechanics and items and quests and NPCs and locations and all that kind of stuff. That's what I do on about for 3.5 days out of the week, and then I run games for those I beta test the modules that we come up with. So I have 2 groups that I basically use as guinea pigs. So I just throw a whole bunch of crazy shit at them and be like, how did you like this? So that's what that looks like.
And they say, I don't like your row mechanics. This was bullshit. Ogres should be able to make that thing go like a speedboat, right?
It's like, this should be faster. What are you doing? It's actually those beta groups a lot. Yeah, I'll throw mechanics like that at them and be like, does this make sense? And I know that if they're like, I want this to be stronger, I'm like, okay, it's perfect. That's great. We nailed it.
True. I think it's Camp Dragon Online.
CampDragonOnline.com. Look at you. Okay. The actual name, throwing it in there.
I just, I got that Google foo going.
That's
sick. That's sick. Like, all right, so I've played some D&D. I haven't played like a ton. I guarantee I've played less than you. But like, I've always only played like homebrew. Yeah, right. So like the idea of the modules is like really fascinating to me. I love I totally grok how like the monsters and whatever and having that sort of setup for you like makes sense. But like, how does the quest make sense? Like, how does the module anticipate and react for players going, I don't fucking want to do that. I'm gonna go do this other stupid bullshit.
Okay, so this is the problem with a lot of modules, right? A lot of modules will be like, well, they have to get here, and then if they don't get here, then most players are gonna be like, I'm a pirate now. Which is kind of it's kind of your DM, who's ever running the game. It's kind of their responsibility to keep people moving forward. It's a little bit of a player, as like a teacher, you can only teach so much. The student has to also do the work in order to you have to meet in the middle. So games are like that as well. Like if your players are just assholes and they're just like, we just want to be pirates, and you're like, great, like I don't have anything prepared for that, so enjoy sailing, fighting a kraken for the next 6 hours. So like they kind of have to pay like a little bit, like take the quest hook, guys. Like if you're gonna play D&D or any TTRPG, just take the freaking hook. It'll be so much more fun than jerking around for a couple hours. But one of the things that you have to do is you have to come at it with like an open-end design aspect where you have either milestones, which is a popular term for it, or basically like what I like to call them is like just points of interest, right? So you create this area that is interesting compared to all of the other areas, and then you entice the players to go there. And then once they're there, and especially if it's their idea, then they'll get super into it and they'll get excited and they'll be like, oh, this is interesting. And once players are hooked into an idea, that's what you got them. Then they can just go and pursue that. So that's kind of my general idea. It's like an open world kind of design where the players get to choose what they do. And by them making the choice, they go for it. It's kind of like when you choose a book you're interested in, right? Like you're presented with all these options and you go, that book's cool, and then you read it because you're the one who picked it. It's the same thing in designing these quests and modules. You just have to very subtly just like give them a small push, just a little bit in that direction. You can get them to do what you want.
Nice. So when you're designing the module and kind of the narrative of it, do you create like branching possibilities within the narrative or
that's why it takes me a while to write these modules, because I try to so like the latest one that I've just written, it's called Embers of Wrath. It's a campaign from levels 5 to 10. It takes place in this big ass desert, and it's all sorts of crazy. There are 4 different narrative paths you can take, and you're not aware they exist. Okay. So they respond to what you do in the various quests that you take. So by the 3rd chapter, you're on one of these routes and you had no idea that you were going to go on one of these routes. Like it's not told to you at all, but based on what you've done in the past, of the first of the first 2 chapters, you then get sent down this branching sort of narrative path, and then at the end of it, so by the end of the 4th chapter, they've come back around to like the final confluence of what's about to happen, and based on what you did in the 3rd chapter, you then get a very specific ending of all your choices. So like what you do actually comes back and affects the game world around you and kind of designs your final encounter. So it's
That's
pretty
so
cool.
rad. That's
And of
so
course,
rad.
there's a super secret ending, which is my favorite, which requires you to do so much dumb shit. Like you have to find this very specific like location that no one tells you about, and you have to like steal this like specific seal. There's like 3 of them that you need to get, and you need to do it in like a certain order. And if you don't do it in that, you can't get the ending. But it's kind of like it's that super secret, like, oh, look at you did it, and it's a lot of fun. So.
Nice. Do you ever get like a tweet from like someone that's played your stuff and be like, "Oh, I got a super secret ending," you know?
No. So my player base right now, I have about 10 people that are in my beta crew. I used to have like 50 players that I oversaw because I would run a lot of games in a week, and my brain was like, you can't do this anymore because it's a lot. It's especially people asking you questions constantly. Most of my players, they're kind of most real like not real. Sorry, I did not mean to say real D&D players. Most D&D players, in my experience, are not like super vocal on Twitter, right? Like the majority of them aren't going to have social media where they constantly go on about it, much to the dismay of like designers and other people who are like, we want you to be on here, but yeah, so like not often. It would be cool. I'd love to see that though. Granted, it would probably just be my wife posting like, "This sucked, bro. You should do better."
All right, we got like chat's kind of popping off today, which is awesome. Thank you guys for being here. All right, so JC and Burn, 93% of fantasy writers get their start by making fiction out of their D&D campaigns. True.
Yeah,
Or like
surprising,
right? I talked with Louise Holland Friday last week, and her novel is a novelization of her D&D campaign that she played with her friends. So like that's pretty dope.
By the way, Joe, for sure 100% accurate statistic, by the way. I'm 1 billion percent positive that 93% of them quote that from now on. Source ACM Burn. Absolutely.
Yeah, and Greg agrees with that. Tim says should play, finally give it a try talking about D&D. Absolutely you should. Greg, other Greg says love tabletop role-playing games. You like role-playing games in general and have some friends that can be super. Yes, I mean definitely your group makes a big difference. You got to have a good group. But
if you have people who like each other, it's always going to be fun. It doesn't matter what you do. If you vibe with the people at your table, you're going to have a good time. That's the thing that people, because it's hanging out, and then you get to throw dice at each other, and if it's in person, you get to throw Cheetos at each other, which is even better. But so like
ice and Cheetos, right?
Yeah, yes. I mean it's a combo. You have to. We actually have a little llama plush, which I did not bring into the room, unfortunately. It's our little llama. He's called Larry, and he is the decider of all things. So if you're not shutting up, we throw him at you, and you have to deal with it. So you should always have a llama Larry with you for.
I need to adopt that.
Yeah,
this has been a couple moments when, like, in the campaign I'm playing every other week with my brother and a couple of his friends. Like, there's been a couple of moments where I feel like they're kind of dragging their feet, and I'm like, "Come on!" There's like one time where, like, I was just like, "No, I'm gonna run through the door," and like, my brother DM was like,
"Favorite plush, all right? Get your favorite plush. Yeah. Give it an awesome name like Larry the Llama, and chuck it at somebody's head every time that they start. Yeah, it works every time.
So simple. Why haven't I thought of this?
Violence here on Novelist.
I love this. Very necessary. Totally agree. Yeah, we're getting more and more people kind of joining. So I want to say again, thank you for joining. If you're on YouTube, go ahead and give me that like and subscribe while you're here. Really appreciate it. If you're on Twitter, get on YouTube and do that anyway. But I'm joined by Gregory Wunderlin. Not only is he a tabletop role-playing game module writer, but he also, wait for it.
Oh, drumroll!
He wrote that fine book. Yeah.
I'm so glad you have that on the screen because I don't have to like put it in front of the camera and make it look like I know what I'm doing as the sun reflects off of it like into my face.
The Soul of Chaos.
Soul of Chaos. Yes. Also, the Sauce of Chaos coming soon. The cookbook accompaniment.
Love it. All right, so we're gonna get into the novel a little bit later, but I want to kind of like talk just a little bit more about tabletop RPGs before we get into you.
Yeah, because nerd stuff. Come on.
Yep. So like, what's been your favorite module that you wrote? Is it recency bias in the recent one, or is it something you wrote a little while? I mean, because
honestly,
you've been doing this for a little while, right?
Yeah, and I've been writing. God, I've been doing this for years and years and years. I've been doing it as a hobby since I was 11, so legitimately 25 years of this stuff at this point.
Nice.
And I didn't do it professionally until the last couple years. That's when I was like, oh, someone's gonna pay me to do this. That's crazy. Which is legitimately like, no one is like, as a kid, I'm gonna be writing for TTRPG modules. It's like never. You're like, what? No one tells you that's a thing.
Yeah,
but I do actually pay my rent with it sometimes. It doesn't always pay super great, but it's still fun.
How can I get into the weeds a little bit? Like, do you get paid based on like a commission or what?
No, so the company pays me a salary, so I am actually salaried, which is amazing. Typically, what you'll in this universe, if you don't work for a particular company like Wizards of the Coast or Paizo or something along those lines, you do contract work as a writer, which sucks because it's a nightmare to navigate through, and you'll probably be underpaid and overworked to do that as well. So I'm very fortunate in that I have a salary doing this currently. It's
nice.
It's pretty fantastic. So, but yeah, so my favorite module is always the last one I've written because you learn every time you read a module, you usually learn something new. It's like writing a book, and every time you finish it, you're like, oh, I did this better. I figured this out. So this last one that I'm not done with it. I still have to write the last final chapter to it. But yeah, this one it's definitely my favorite because it incorporates everything that I've experienced and done and know of in the mechanics. Like I created a whole caravanning system for this one particular module. So at any you can just be like, screw the plot, we're going to be caravanners now, and there's a whole mini game that you can play that lasts 4 hours at a time. It's like, let's stop playing this and we'll do Settlers of D&D. The Settlers of Catan joke for you true nerds out there. Anyway,
I get it.
but yeah, so like when you go into this module, not only do you have access to the actual plot and what's happening around you, there's mini game mechanics in there. So I have a building system as well. So if you really want to, you can just become caravanners, build your own village, and play D&D Merchant Edition. So that's the whole
I love that
kind of run there.
I love when I again I've played like a little bit in D&D. I'm more of a video gamer, so I love though when like an RPG adds sort of like those mini games, like even World of Warcraft. Like if you're waiting for everyone to come to the raid, you could just like go fish. I feel like it adds like, a lot of. It's totally pointless, but it just adds flavor.
Yeah, it's fun. It's the thing about games that I think so many people forget, and especially with like modern or video game design, fun. Make it fun. Like everything else doesn't matter. If it's fun, it's good. I don't care anything else. And if you get too, we get too involved with the narrative sometimes, or we take ourselves too like, I am designing a video game. Like, chill, bro. It's like you're playing. Most of the games I play, you're pretending to be a dude wielding a stick, and you're just like, rah. It's whatever. Like it's all escapism. It's all fun. It's all fantasy. Like just make it a good time. That's what matters.
Not only are you pretending to be a dude wielding a stick, but somehow you get stronger by beating rats with your stick, right? That's the way they always start.
Exactly. I mean, you would if you beat rats every day. Wow, that's definitely double entendre right there. You will eventually get stronger because you're doing the exercise. You're smacking them with the stick and all
that. Nice. Okay, so let's talk about you a little bit. So one of the things that I think is interesting when I do these interviews, most authors, most creatives, as you were kind of mentioning, we're not little children thinking, I'm going to write for tabletop RPGs, right? That doesn't even seem like an option.
Voice in there too. Perfect. Love the voice edition.
Thank you.
Go
ahead. So yeah, just about everyone I talked to, they've had like a series of jobs that have kind of gotten them to here. And so I asked you that question ahead of time, and you said Barnes & Noble jack of all trades, third shift gas station attendant, shoe sales, car sales. And the car sales does seem way better than the shoe sales.
It's progressive, right? You sales, eventually you work your way up to selling the biggest things, and I think all sales eventually ends at either stocks or realty. That's like the progression of a sales career, right? You either end up selling property or end up selling fake money. It's not my opinion on the stock market at all. Anyway, but no, so you end up getting that. I hated all these jobs, by the way. I cannot. Well, that's not true. I liked working at Barnes and Noble, but we eventually got the worst boss ever, TM, at the end of it. And we had one of those like tyrannical people who works at a Barnes and Noble and thinks their job is way more important than it should be.
Right.
If you've never seen 120% turnover at a store before, it is amazing. It is
Wow.
absolute. Yeah, it was rough. It was so bad. It was so bad. That was
Hopefully that
years and years
person
ago.
got canned.
Yeah, I was a
Yeah.
manager. I was actually the digital manager back when Barnes and Noble cared about the Nook
Oh.
stuff, and so I was walking around trying to sell digital products at a freaking bookstore, which was fun. I wasn't bad at it, but it's not exactly like a dream job, you know. It's not like you're telling your mom, like, "Look what job I'm doing." You know, no one cares.
Can I
But
tell
yeah,
you,
it
like,
was a
I had similarly, like, I had a job where I worked at China Garden, and I was just delivering people Chinese food, and, like, that was a job too where I was like, this is fine, but, like, I kind of enjoy this even, but there was not a lot of upward mobility at China Garden, so
it's not a career. Yeah, right. It's not a career
right,
choice.
right,
It's
right, right,
I need money to pay rent kind of situation. We've all been there. At least I hope you've been there, because if you haven't been there, go work a shitty job for a couple months,
yeah.
and you will be able to truly understand despair, and it will make you a better person.
It will
That
make you a better person, right? Um,
or it'll turn you into a gritty old bastard, which it's one or the other. I don't think there's a choice.
yeah. Aren't they the same thing? No, I'm just kidding. Um, so then you got into kind of doing freelance technical writing for years,
So
which
yeah,
seems
I did that.
like, depending on who you're doing it for, seems very, very different than fantasy tabletop RPG writing.
It's awful. It's god awful. So it's technical writing. So you're writing. You can write. You do ad copy. You can write manual stuff. It is the most
Mhm.
boring thing on the planet. It's terrible. I did a few jobs. I used to do. I would proof like briefs for like a law firm. Like I knew people who worked in that field. So like, yeah, we'll throw you this, or you can like do advertisement. A lot of advertising copy. A lot of like communications work. It
Mhm.
sucks. I hated it. Um, and working contract work again is so people don't like to pay you. Like they'll do everything they can to not pay you. And even if you send them a contract and they'll sign it, they'll still be, well, based on the quality of your work, you're like, shut up. Like it's fine. You have no idea what you're talking about. Like it, or they'll get it, and you'll be like, hey, so I've got 5 revisions in this contract. So would you like me to revise this at all? And they'll be like, no. And then they'll contact you 2 months later and be like, we need you to revise this. Like it's done. Like we've already moved on. Like you have to pay for this new service. Uh, so it's a nightmare working with that kind of field. So I'm glad not to be doing that anymore. That's for sure.
Right, right, right. It's how did you fall into this writing of tabletop RPGs? How did, like, did they have like a posting somewhere and you're like, well, that
Right,
sounds good?
tabletop RPGs. No, that does not. Well, it might happen now. It didn't happen even a couple years ago, really, because
Right,
it's only been recent that like D&D and all those and TTRPGs have kind of blown up. And even blown up is not as big as people think it is. It's still pretty
right.
niche. So it's pretty rare to find a company that's hiring, unless it's Paizo or like Wizards of the Coast,
Hmm.
doing that kind of stuff. There are other companies out there. Like I'm doing contract work for a company called QausiReal right now as a writer, but
Hey.
it's very few and far between. It's something you have to kind of luck across or network your way across, which if that's not your strong suit, kind of screwed, like me. Which I lucked purely into it. But yeah, so it's something that a friend. I've been doing this for, like I said, years. So a little 2.5 decades at this point as like a hobby. And I had a friend who basically knew of Camp Dragon, the company I work for, who was playing in it
Right.
and its Kickstarter. He said, hey, these DMs aren't amazing. You should try out for this, because he knew that I'd been doing this for so long. And I was like, oh, and I thought it was a joke. I was like, no one's going to pay me to, you know, run a game.
Yeah,
Like that's not real. Like that's not a thing. And it
that's
was
not a,
real.
yeah. Turns out,
Yeah, and
yeah.
so and that's it. It just ended up being real. And they saw me run a game, and they hired me, and then they realized that I could write words, and like, oh, you should do this instead. So now it's kind of transitioned into the whole thing.
It's
When I originally
so, what?
started, I was running 8 to 10 games a week, and like the full time, which never do that ever. Do not do that. You will die. Like it's awful.
It was that was the interview like running a game?
No, it was a legit interview, but all the
Okay.
questions were focused around Dungeons and Dragons, so it felt like a joke. Again, like
Yeah.
literally, my boss Dan, who is amazing, love him to death. He would ask me questions. So if there's like one rule in Dungeons and Dragons, what would you change? I'm like, it's like what? Like, do you want to listen to me talk for 3 hours? Like, what's going on here? Because everything. It was probably the easiest interview of
Everything.
my
Oh, wow.
life. Because he was like
Yeah.
testing my knowledge on D&D. I'm like, okay, well, what do you want to know, dude? Because yeah, I'm a
Yeah.
giant nerd. Super.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, in that case, so Gregory, if there was one rule in D&D, what would you change?
How long is this interview? How much time do we have? Honestly, if there's one thing that I would give everyone advice for as far as running failure mechanics, Dungeons and
Mm,
Dragons does not have enough failure mechanics, and it
mm,
makes failing suck so hard. Again,
mm,
we're bringing it back to fun, right? You want to have fun when you're playing a game.
mm.
So the fact that when you fail in a game like 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, typically nothing happens. So you essentially just spent your turn or whatever you're doing nothing, right? You said, "Hey, I want to do this thing." You roll the dice. The dice says, "Fuck you, bud." And you're like, "Oh, okay, all right." And then you're like, "That's fine. I'll just go sit in a corner and cry a little bit off camera." We're not all that sensitive. Most of us are, but but nothing happens out of it, and so it's fine. So failure mechanics is something. What I use is a system called Focus, which is something of my own design, where if you fail an ability check, well, an important ability check, a saving throw, or an attack roll, like something important to the system, you get a point of focus. And what that
Mhm.
means is focus. You get angry or you get focused, and you start doing whatever you need to do. And then later, when you make another roll, you can use those focus points to enhance your roll. So
Wow.
it's a failure mechanic. Basically, that means every time you fail, your chance of success in the future gets a little bit stronger and more capable. So
That's
you're not going to get
so
caught
cool.
in
Yeah,
permanent successive failures, which is where people start to lose interest in the game. So, for
right.
instance, with this focus rule, you can use 3 focus to give yourself advantage on your next attack roll in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, which means you're probably going to hit because you get to roll the d20 twice and take the higher number. So you end
Right.
up having these that's it needs this game needs stuff like that. So people are just more interested in the game, right? They're more having fun. So
Right.
that's the if I could change only one thing, that would be it, on top of a lot of other things.
I love that. That sounds really cool. I mean, that's really smart, and I love that. Yeah, I love like game. I for a while I went to school like thinking about game design and game development. But it's really interesting, kind of thinking about how do you make this more fun? How do you make it more engaging? How do you? Yeah, I love that. Love that.
Yeah, it's a lot of things with fun is right. It's removing. You don't want to remove the possibility of failure because then it's not a game, right? Then it's a puzzle, and it gets collaborative, and you're working together to figure out a solution. And I want you to figure out the solution so that it gets away from actually being a game. So in order for it to be game, there needs to be some kind of a win-loss condition, and there needs to be
Hmm.
something to kind of to struggle for a little bit. Which you never want to take away failure in a whole. You got to remember that there needs to be the ability to fail, but the way that you treat failure is kind of important to how much fun the game is, right? Because you don't want
Yeah.
people to fail so often that they're not contributing, and that's the important thing. People need to be able to contribute, and the moment that you take away their ability to do that, so 5e D&D does this all the time. There's a spell called Hold Person, and every player hates this spell because if you fail the save on this, you're paralyzed, and paralyzed means you don't do anything, and it's a fairly low level spell. You basically just like, oh, what do you do in your turn? I do nothing because I'm paralyzed. Cool. All right. Glad you're here. Glad you're playing. So,
And
it's
I
stuff
feel like that kind of would work fine if turns were fast, but like, how often are turns actually fast? You
it
know?
depends on your group. If you have an
Yeah.
experienced group that works well together, they can be quick. But generally, if you're playing with 7 people, no matter how fast your
Right.
turns are,
Right.
you just waited 10 minutes to get to your turn, and your turn is I'm gonna sit there and stare at the wall. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
enjoy, have fun.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
that's the important thing to remember, that doing things like that or having those kind of things in there, it'll ruin somebody's fun. So, like for instance, in my games, I got rid of paralysis. I have a weak. I make it a vulnerable state. So if you get hit with Hold Person, you can't move, and you're vulnerable to the next instance of damage you take, rather than not being able. So you can still do stuff. You have to find a creative way around your current situation. I
Love it.
used a dazed condition instead of stunned, which you can still move and like attack, but you have a bunch of penalties that make it less. So, stuff to make the game fun when you actually enjoy what you're doing.
Love it. All right, we've been chatting for a little while. More and more people are kind of joining on Twitter and that sort of thing. So I want to say again, joined by Gregory Wunderlin. He is a writer for tabletop RPGs, and you can check that out at campdragononline.com. Put that there. And he is also the author of the lovely The Soul of Chaos, which you can
there
go
it is again.
Right.
Sorry. Please do your sales pitch, please.
Over at Amazon. I know it's on Amazon. Is it like everywhere the books are sold?
Yeah, it's wide, so you can get on Barnes and Noble. Amazon is the cheapest place because, of course,
Hmm.
it is, because that's what they
Hmm.
do. They're little bastards. So
Hmm.
you can get it the hard copy on Amazon for $20. The Kindle version, I think, is like $6 or $7. I don't know. Talk to my publisher. You can Barnes and Noble. If you type in The Soul of Chaos and then my name, it'll come up with all the places you can purchase that. So it's all over the place.
Nice. Okay. So those of you still in the chat, I really want to hear some of your D&D stories. Like, what things would you change? What are some of your favorite campaigns? How much do you want to go rowboats with Gregory's rules?
Boats with ogres. There's a lot of other rules in that book as well, but apparently it's all about the ogres at this point.
It's all about the ogres.
That's from a book called Crafting and Companions, which is it gives you a full crafting system for every piece of loot you can have in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, including including vehicles. So you can actually design your own boats with that rule book. Hence the what do you do when you have ogres rowing your boat that you've made. So that's kind of the whole collection.
Nice. Bert's the man. I'm sure Gregory appreciates it.
I do. Bert's amazing. Bert is like, hey, do you have another copy? And I'm like, Bert, you already have it. He's like, that's cool. I'm going to give it to somebody else. Like, all right, Bert, can we be best friends?
Yeah. This is really interesting. Use solo player mode of Black Sword Hack to write the first chapter of your debut novel. It really helped to spin up some action without doing too many deep tropey bits. That is fascinating. So
yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So, solo RPGs are a big thing these days. Basically, it allows you to play Dungeons and Dragons or Black Sword Hack, to play these games by yourself.
Yeah.
If you don't, if you can't get people together, or they're unreliable, or you're just, you're in Alaska or whatever, you can't find folks to play with.
Right.
They're huge. So that's actually really cool that you actually do that. It makes a lot of sense too, because you can craft your own narrative using these tools to kind of set that up. So that's actually awesome.
Especially as a debut novel, like what a great way to kind of get things going. I like that a lot. Very cool. Very interesting. All right, Gregory, I want to get into the book, but let's briefly touch on your favorite books and favorite games a little bit. So, favorite books you listed too. You want to walk us through what some of your favorite books are?
Oh man, I have trouble. I always have trouble with favorites, right? Because favorites they're so incomparable, especially between genre. So you have to like pretend that you like this one more than this one. And it's difficult to do that sometimes, right? So it gets kind of, for me, favorites. I usually have like top lists, right? So I'll be like, oh, what's your favorite song, or what's your favorite, a performance artist? So like, oh, here's a list of 5, and they're not in any particular order. So as far as books go, I think I try to do authors more than actual books, because I'm drawn to voices, and I'm drawn to narrative and storytelling abilities rather than specific books. So Chuck Palahniuk is one of which is such a terrible thing to say, because people are like, wait, I'm sorry, the guy who wrote the crazy, most people know him from Fight Club, but if you've actually read his other stuff, it's usually it's so much more dark than that. But I love
it's so much worse.
Yeah, I mean, and I learned the term recently of what he actually writes, which is, I think Jay, who might be watching this or in the chat, is splatterpunk, which is the most accurate term for what he does. But love that kind of style, that really extremely sardonic, sarcastic, pessimistic narrative, sort of making fun of people for being people, which is my jam. But yeah, so like he's one of my top authors. Just in general, it's just fun he writes short books, so it's easy to pick up whatever he's written, get into it, laugh for a little bit, see the inanity of humanity, and move on to something else. Like I'm a big fan of classic fantasy authors. Love Ursula Le Guin. Like absolutely. I can't. Earthsea is just so good. Like honestly, it's one of the most perfect fantasy series, just because of it's easy to get through. It's fun. It's got dragons. Like you can just you can do the whole thing, and it's fun to look at books like that and see how much they influenced our modern fantasy fiction. Because wizards with staves, right? People think Gandalf. They instantly go, well, Gandalf, he had a stick and a staff, and yeah, that's true. But also, if you look at the wizards in Earthsea, they're very tied to their like staves and how they kind of interact with that universe, and that's just as inherent in how we write today as it is from like Tolkien. So love that. Margaret Weiss, Tracy Hickman. Jay, hell yeah, Earthsea for life. It's just, as for the Dragonlance stuff, ate that. Love Garth Nix. Big fan of those authors. God, you're putting me on the start trying to remember names. I'm terrible.
No. This is good. That's good. You're giving me a perfect segue. Let's talk about your book. What how did some of those influence your book?
how did they not? Really is the question, because like you can't choose what influences you. It just does. It's in the
Sure.
back of your mind, right? So,
Right.
I've read science fiction fantasy forever between Dune and like Lord of the Rings and all the books I just mentioned. Very specifically, my first ever fantasy fiction novel I ever read was Rhapsody by Elizabeth Hayden, and that is not a children's book. It's not for kids. I read it when I was 11. The first thing that happens in the book, there's a very touching and well written romantic sex scene between two characters, and I was like, I'm in. As you know, uh, definitely not for the children, but still a fantastic series. Love that. And
Nice.
but you know, again, they everything you've ever read influences the book. So
Yeah.
and you kind of that's what voice is, right? Is you take all of your influences and then you process it yourself and then you create it as you influence. So everything's influenced it in so many different ways. Soul of Chaos is actually science fiction fantasy, or fantasy sci-fi, sci fantasy, whatever. But it's a mix of the both of the things, and it kind of tricks you because at the start it
Yeah.
seems very traditional fantasy book, and then the more you go through the book, you're like, oh, like there's some hardcore science fiction stuff going on in this world.
See,
Which
I
you
was
get
wondering about that
into.
because yeah, like you had said somewhere that like kind of science fantasy, and I was like, that's interesting. I'm not getting that from the cover, you know.
Because the world itself is very solidly fantasy, right? So you have like
Hmm.
a Renaissance era level of technology for most places. So, for
Okay.
instance, the main cover shows the two main characters. You have Rurik and Arcalis, who are actually twins, fraternal
Hmm.
twins, not identical. And
Clearly, yeah.
very clearly, right? They have varied, and there's a reason why they're actually not identical twins, which is actually covered in the book. Because of things that happen. Spoilers. But so you end up looking at their characters. So what Rurik is actually wearing in this is not like a standard suit of armor that you have in fantasy world. It's actually a suit of armor that he recovers from this lost civilization that he starts in. And it's fully tech. Like this armor it has like a gorget and a helmet that can like come up off its own, like out of the suit and like kind of clicks into place over his head. It's basically impervious to all of the fantasy weapons, so they have access to like arquebuses, flintlocks, and all that kind of stuff. And people shoot at him, and it just bounces off the armor because it's like, nerds. So you have basically those elements in there, and the glaive he's wielding also has some fantasy element, some science fiction elements to it also. But again, spoilers. So but you look at Arcalis on the back here, and she is just full fantasy mode, so she doesn't have access to any of that kind of stuff. So what the state that these are basically the end states of the characters on the cover of the book and what they're in. So Arcalis is towards the end of her arc. She's gotten her ass kicked. She's in a terrible place. She's wielding the sword that you can kind of see these like black sort of this aura around it, which is not
Hmm.
good for her at all. It's basically a cursed kind of blade that she's wielding. So
Hmm.
she's very much into the very fantasy element of it. So you do end up getting, and they're very strong towards the end of the novel, and you get the blend of it. Um, which you kind of I don't know. It's cool. I love the blending genres is one of my favorite things to do, and getting
Love
these
it.
really unique circumstances of somebody firing a flintlock at a dude wearing armor that you would see in Star Wars, basically. Like super advanced level stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's fun. That sounds really cool. So, you've kind of, I've heard you pitch it before as action first D&D inspired science fantasy.
Mhm.
Love all of that. I love all those words. That combination really works for me. You also said like, kind of a combination of Berserk and Wheel of Time. So I love that. Tell me a little bit more about how is it like Berserk and Wheel of Time together?
So Wheel of Time, it's that lost civilization sort of aspect to it, which Wheel of Time kind of gets into. And one of
Hmm.
my favorite things about the Wheel of Time is that progression that you get in the
Hmm.
actual story. Despite the fact that it's 5,000 books long, and my God, it takes forever to read through. By the end of it, you have they had this advanced level of tech, right, that they didn't have at the beginning, that they're using to kind of fight these armies of darkness. So it's very similar on that regard. Of like in the beginning of the book, they have a very specific X that they're using, and then by the end of the book, you have Rurik being able to like summon these powers, and Arcalis having very similar capabilities by the end of it. So a sense of progression is very similar there. The Renaissance level of technology, that's I love fantasy that isn't just solidly like medieval, right? Because
Hmm.
that's home for sure. A lot of us love living there, but sometimes you want to take an adventure outside of that and see
What a
technology
great way
from.
to put that. You should think about, doing like words for a living or something.
Yeah, right, like writing or something.
Yeah,
Next time I'll try making money off it, see if that works.
yeah.
uh, but no, so you end up you want to see these other places, right? You want to see what medieval means for other cultures, because if you look at history, it's not the same. Not everyone went through a Western medieval dark ages. Like if
Mhm.
you look at Chinese history, you look at especially like Middle Eastern history too. My God, like when Western Europe was like, oh, there are giants around here. You had Baghdad back then. There's their golden age of science and technology and collecting books. And it wasn't until Genghis Khan was like, we're gonna kill everything, that they lost all that. So you want to see what other cultures look like. You want to see what their quote unquote medieval period looks like, and existing in a realm that isn't just that traditional fantasy world is cool. So that's when you start in the Soul of Chaos. The main country that you're in is called Ilvikar. They're in their renaissance, essentially what it comes down to. So you have that style of clothing. They have wide access to firearms, because they did have firearms in the medieval era. It's just they were kind of shitty. But everyone has access to them. Their armor is a lot lighter. You have more of there's a very gothic sort of architecture style, because the country is like a mixture of Germanic and French kind of cultures. So you get that kind of mixture in there as far as they go. But there's so many other cultures in this book that you meet that are in different levels of technology as well. So you get that cool kind of like mixture. So getting that and involved and like kind of seeing these cultural influences of history and being like, oh, this is a world. Like this is a world where people have different experiences and access to things, and you see them kind of interact and what that comes out to.
That's awesome, man. I like that.
I'm a big
Sounds
history buff, if you couldn't tell.
Like I mean, genuinely, I feel like anyone who's not a history buff just actually hasn't like been exposed to history in the right way, because whatever you're into, I guarantee like there's a cool story related to that in history somewhere,
There's probably an insane story related to it somewhere.
Right.
Like someone did something absolutely hysterically nuts, and it's hilarious to like read about. Our favorite one is what Caligula like made his horse a consul, right? Because he was like, screw you guys, look what I did. And that's a thing that's history. Like
You were just talking too about how there was the Middle Eastern their own sort of renaissance, and then you mentioned that was sort of squashed by Genghis Khan, and like that I hadn't quite put those two together that way, and that
people don't so people don't realize that a lot of things that you hear about, they were in the same period of history, right? So Baghdad was sacked by Mongols, and they burned the city and the books. Stop burning books. Right. So you end up losing all of this technology, all everything that's come from. You didn't lose everything, obviously. Like it's still a very grand period, and people, science and all that. So conquerors typically destroy progression, right? Like when you get these great conquerors that we see as these heroes, like no, they're not heroes. They went around murdering people just so they could get more things to their name. Like these are not good people. Alexander the Great was great, but he's kind of evil, right? Because he's just going around conquering people, naming cities after himself, like all 900,000 Alexandrias that are out there. And then finally when right, my favorite thing about Alexander the Great is he gets all the way through it. I'm pretty sure he got up through India, and then his soldiers are like, dude, we're done, like we don't want to do this anymore. And he's like, you wusses. They're like, no, we're done. And then they leave, and he dies from like depression on the way back home, because he's like, but I want to kill more people. It's these figures.
I did not know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I'm an amateur historian. Please not take my information as fact here. I do not have credentials to back this up. Go look up actual historians talking about this. Those are the real heroes, people. But yeah, so like you get these interesting stories of people and like what they did, and it's a very interesting thing to denote. Conquerors are not heroes. Please remember that, of all things. They didn't, unless they're staging a great defense, against these people trying to invade and like conquer and murder people, then sure, you can call them heroes. But usually those heroes end up becoming villains because they get the power from it. It's people who actively try and seek to murder in order to acquire more. Like it's not a good thing.
Maybe don't put that on a pedestal. It makes sense.
Yeah, right. It's dramatic and it's fun to read about, and especially to theorize about in a fantasy world. But we don't like it when it happens.
No. Sort of a kind of a bummer.
I told you I was going to distract you away from important stuff this entire time. Like you just let me go.
I like it. I mean, we could talk for another hour about history, but I don't think we really should, you know?
We should actually probably talk about, like, I'm so bad with these because I like start talking about real stuff, and people are like, "Don't you have a book?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, right, I do. I do have that thing."
Well, we have talked about the book a little bit, so we've got that covered. But is the book that's so right now? This is your only book out in the world, The Soul of Chaos. But
Yes,
is
it is
this
my only
planned
book.
as part of a series?
Yes, yeah, it is. So if you see at the top there, it says "Litanies of the
Litanies of
Lost Star." That's the
right.
series title, and there are
Wow.
so I'm planning for 4 or 5 in the entirety of the series. Sorry, excuse me.
Litanies of the Lost Star sort of reads a little bit more sci-fi to me. Is it going to get progressively more sci-fi?
Yes. So it never loses the fantasy edge. It's not.
Yeah.
It'll never do that because most of the cultures in the world. So the whole premise is that this world is recovering from a apocalyptic event, which basically wiped most of, if not all of civilization off the planet. So it's been the standard about 1,000 years since then, which is, again, I don't want to spoil or anything, but so you have that at the beginning going in there. So and civilization has recovered pretty quickly. The fact that they're already in a renaissance because there's stuff that was left over, so there's not
Mm-hmm.
entirely wiped out. Basically the idea is that there's it's called the Church of the Sun Star, which is on a place called Ecclesia, which fantasy names just coming at you in quick succession, which I know everybody loves.
No, it's
So
good.
you
It's good.
have right, so you have them, and they are one of the few institutions that survived this apocalypse, so they were able to seed information. Not all people died, obviously there were pockets of people, so they were able to kind of seed information and make civilization kind of, so
Oh
it's not
no.
like they were wiped to zero. So civilization has recovered kind of quickly, and through the events of this story you're kind of seeing snippets of what happened then, and it's kind of starting to happen again. So that's kind of these two characters at the beginning start in this way that they're like, oh, we're just trying to survive because we're in shitty situations. Rurik starts as essentially a not necessarily a slave, but he's been exiled to this ruin to die because it's a very dangerous ruin where things explode all the time. In fact, the first 3 pages you get an explosion because bad things. Um, and Arcalis, who is his younger sister by all of a couple seconds, has spent her entire life basically doing nothing because she's the second heir, so she hasn't had to actually rise to any sort of occasion. So she's a lush, she's a drunk, like she's promiscuous. She just kind of does whatever the hell she wants during the course of the day. And now she's suddenly the heir to the entire dukedom of their kingdom, and it's a big responsibility. Like it's a whole like it's a kingdom that she needs to pay attention to, and her father's on the way out, so she's like, fuck. Like, I don't want to do any of this. I am not interested at all. So the book starts with them just kind of in their lives kind of figuring this out, and then as it fully goes you start to realize that, like, oh no, this is about to happen again and people need to stop it. And these two idiots end up being very partially responsible for either restarting it or stopping it. That's the fun stuff. I'm not going to spoil any of that, but
Well,
who knows what's going to happen.
that sounds so fun. That like wow, I love the premise. I love everything kind of working together. That sounds really all right. I guess I'm gonna be reading it now. Like and everyone else should go and get it. Yeah.
Because my favorite thing about this too is the way it starts is it really frames Rurik as like the main character, but as the book goes, you realize that Arcalis is actually the main character.
Nice.
So they kind of they start like here, and then it ends up being kind of like this towards the end of it, where she starts to get her shit together and do things.
I
Because
love
she's
that in
the
Game
sorry,
of
go ahead.
Thrones, like how like Daenerys is clearly like the main, but you don't get that in the beginning. You don't get that Daenerys is like like so important, so key to like the
Yeah,
overall
yeah, that
story.
it's I love that kind of that it's like it's bearing the lead, right? Is what
Yeah,
it really
yeah,
is about,
yeah,
who bearing the lead about who the lead is.
yeah.
But it's kind of because it gives your character so much room to grow. Rurik at the start of the book is kind of mostly fully formed. Like he's a
Hmm.
leader, like he's already been through these shaping events that have turned him into someone who's decisive and can get things done. Arcalis though is like, nah, bro, I'm gonna drink. I'm gonna take this dude up to my room. Like that's my day right there. And then he can't do that anymore, and it's starting to so things go down that make her actually have to like pay attention. And to
Right.
mostly though, like she's so much fun to write. She's based a very I don't know. She's very certain. She's very much herself. That's the kind of the feedback that I've gotten about her is that she just
Hmm.
kind of like once Arcalis, like people, especially dudes, like men that read the book, they'll be like, I didn't like her at first, but by the end of the book, I was like, yeah, go Arcalis, like kill it. Um, has been as far as she's a very fun character to get into.
Nice, nice, nice. So 4 or 5 books. When within these can we expect to also have like a playable TTRPG bonus bit? Yeah, I feel like you have to. I feel like you have to.
If time allows, right? So if that's the problem, is it takes a long time to design. If you're talking about a system, it takes forever, especially if you're doing it by yourself. A
Sure.
world set, that's a lot easier to do, but there's so
Mm-hmm.
much time involved in this kind of stuff. So I tell you what, if everyone goes out there and actually buys these books and gives me the ability to sell them and then get money to actually have time open for that, then you can expect it. I don't know, sometime next decade.
You can expect it with before the sun
The end of the
explodes. Yeah.
world, which is only like 20 or 30 years from now. So,
Stop
there's
that.
a fine.
I can't live my life that way, you know? Like, I mean, you're right, but I don't want to think. I'm trying to bury myself in fantasy and sci-fi so I don't have to
Yeah,
think about the actual end of the world. Please.
exactly. We'll just escape into our fantasy worlds. That's what we do. We got this.
Thank
We'll
you.
be okay. And then we'll be in Fallout. So that'll be fun. Question mark.
We have the experience. We've played the game. We know what to do in
Right,
that
we're ready to go.
scenario.
I'm already collecting my caps. Like, like just have those bottle caps ready to trade. We'll see
Nice.
how that goes. Let's be honest. I'm the person who just dies in the apocalypse. Like, I'm not going to live past it. The guy looks up at the sky and I'm like, oh, that's a nuke. Uh-oh.
Yeah. You're the person that somebody else gets your bottle cap stash.
Yeah, exactly. Someone's going to find a note with my name on it. It's like, I'm ready for the apocalypse. And I'll get a bunch of stupid player characters.
And Gregory was wrong. Yeah, he was not ready.
Absolutely.
That's funny. All right. This has been a lovely chat. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for being here, Gregory.
We did it.
We did it.
We did it. We got through it.
Did the thing.
I can breathe now.
Where can people find and follow you online, Gregory?
Oh God, that's right. Plugging myself. Thank you so much for doing that, by the way, because I will forget otherwise. So I am mostly active on Twitter because I am bad at social media. So you can find me on Twitter at gwritespretty. It's exactly spelled exactly how it sounds. I'm also on Blue Sky, kind of, sorta, not really too much. If you look up Gregory Wunderlin, I should pop up on there. Who cares about Facebook, right? Like, is that a thing anymore? Is that what we do? You can, if that's your preference, you can search Gregory Wunderlin. I'm on there as an author. That's generally kind of where I hang out. Also, you can find me most of the time on Discord, though. That's usually my general haunt. The SFF Insiders Discord, which is run by the wonderful Bo Kelly on there, who is all over Twitter right now. That's usually where you can find me. Not only that, but I'll usually respond directly to people on there. So if you have questions or just want to talk about anything, I'm pretty active as far as responding to things on Discord. So you can find me all over the place on that.
Nice plug for SFF Insiders. That's where I like to hang out too.
It's a great little community of authors and readers and nerds. Honestly, it's very positive. Like, we were just talking to an author this morning who was not having a great day, and we just all were like, "Hey, man, it gets better." So it's just a nice place.
I'm gonna drop that Discord link right in the chat, and obviously,
look at that.
I can't drop it on Twitter easily, but maybe you can type it out. But yeah, join us on SFF Insiders. Super fun place to hang out with lots of other readers, some writers. There's one guy in there that makes a meme of every 5 pages he reads, I think, and it's fantastic.
Oh, to have the time.
Right? It's wonderful. It's wonderful. You also have GregoryWunderlin.com, where I believe people can sign up for a newsletter.
Thank you so much. Yes, so just myname.com is my website. You can sign up for a newsletter that you can get access to all of my stuff. That's where I have all of my TTRPG work posted as well. So you can just go there. You'll see it right on the front, the Soul of Chaos, and where you can grab those. As much as I hate condoning Amazon, it is the cheapest place to get it. So it's where I recommend people go, because spending less money is always good. You can also, if you look at the top, you'll see TTRPG up there. That's where you can find all of my additional stuff. Most of it's all 5th edition currently. I'm working on other stuff as we talk, but you can find 10 custom classes, the crafting supplement we mentioned earlier, and of course my favorite one, which is actually called the Heritage Companion. If you play 5th edition, it essentially allows you to construct your own race and background. So instead of having to choose like human, elf, or dwarf, you get to make your own as far as it goes. So you can play anything from a human to a celestial aberration to an ooze. If you really want to play an ooze, it's there. Like, you can do it. And it also has like 150 feats on there. So if you're going to buy anything, you should get that one, because it'll make your game so much more fun. Yeah, look at me. Look at me. My wife is gonna be so she's gonna be so proud of me for actually plugging my stuff.
You talked about your own stuff. Well done, Gregory. Well done.
I'm gonna get a treat today, guys. Like hold it up like a dog. Like, you did it. Good job.
Yeah. All right, cool. This has been super fun. Thanks everyone for joining us for this chat. Thanks for being in the chat. I appreciate it. Thanks for the likes and subscribes that you dropped on YouTube. That really helps me with the algorithm, helps get the word out to more and more folks. You can also find me on Patreon where it's free. That's basically where I have my newsletter. But if you go to Patreon, just search for Nicholas W. Fuller. You can find me and join for free. And that's going to do it for us today. Thanks again, Gregory. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you for actually having me and letting me just wax on endlessly about stuff. So
it has been wonderful, and it has made my job at the interview very easy.
Fantastic. I'm glad.
And thank you for being here and watching. If no one else has told you yet today, you're an absolute legend.